hot? I guess I'm not hot. You ready? Okay. I thought you were leaving. I thought you saw who was teaching, and you're like, I'm out of here.
Thought about it.
Exactly. Bring it up a little bit. Or I could just talk like this. I could just 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah. I wore a nice shirt today for everybody. I even tucked it in. I was tucking it in the truck, so it may look a little sloppy, but I did tuck it in for everybody. So I wanted to just give a thank you to Brandon Caciapa here, and so just thank you for what you've done for this class. This is Brandon's idea for this class, and so it means a lot. He means a lot to the Adult Education Committee here, and I guess I need a clicker too. You got it for me? Thank you. So just really appreciative of him and what he does for the church here. So tonight we're in the book of Ecclesiastes, and if you're following along, we'll be covering the first 6 chapters, and maybe you've already done some study on the first 6 chapters. And if you know anything about the book of Ecclesiastes, the first 11 chapters are full of despair, right? So a lot of despair. And so the conclusion of the matter is in chapter 12. So that makes my job pretty hard, that I get to talk about all this despair, and then Rodney comes in on cleanup duty next week, and he gets to talk about the good stuff. Some of my predecessors had kind of come up with parallels to Disney movies, and that's just not going to happen tonight. There's no parallels I can think of for the despair that we're going to talk about. So there's a lot of despair, but the author does give hints of hope as he goes through. But ultimately, he's going to conclude in chapter 12 with what gives hope and meaning to a person's life. So we won't have time to go into detail on all 6 chapters, but I hope we can pull the essence out in a sermon-like format. So a little bit different than what we've been doing, but just, anyways. I'd hope to skip the authorship part, but I was looking at some commentaries, and one commentary had just really gone down this crazy path. So I think I want to bring up the authorship, because if we didn't, it just wouldn't do the lesson justice. So who the author is, and I think most of us generally accept that it's Solomon. And by looking at the scriptures, I think that's pretty evident to me. The author identifies himself in verse 1 to being the preacher or convener or a collector. In Hebrew, the word is koheleth, and this conveys the idea of someone collecting wisdom. And why would somebody collect wisdom necessarily? What would be his purpose? If he's the preacher and he's collecting wisdom, what's he going to do with it? He's going to share it, right? So that's exactly what he's doing. And let's see, I forgot. And bear with me too, because I printed off my notes 3 different times today, because every time I would read, I'd find something new. And don't think I'm super prepared. I'm like a squirrel up here with a bunch of information. I'll just be all over the place. So he's got the purpose of giving that wisdom. Further, the author claims to be the son of David, king in Jerusalem, and in verse 12, he claims to have been the king over Israel. So these are some clues. There's nobody else. I mean, David had other sons, but none other were kings in Jerusalem. In verse 16, he says his wisdom surpassed all before him. In chapter 2, he speaks of all the excessive wealth, the self-indulgence and wisdom he had. So these all seem to point to Solomon. And a lot of people tend to think that maybe it's Solomon, when he's writing this, he's reflecting on his life. Maybe he's older, maybe he's repentant, but we don't really have any record of him dying repentant. 1 Kings chapter 11, it's just not there with him dying repentant. But, we do hope that he did, that he repented, because he was certainly in sin. And he certainly did a lot of things. Matter of fact, the curse was placed on, or the prophecy was placed on his kingdom, that the kingdom would be taken away from his family line, but not necessarily in his time, but of his sons. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So Solomon had the wealth, he had the wisdom, and he had the understanding. And so I think we can pretty much go forward with that. And again, that will play back into our lesson a little bit. So as many parents today, after their children are born, you start to contemplate, hey, I really want to give my child some wisdom. And, so maybe that's what he was doing here. Maybe he wanted to impart wisdom to his children. I know a couple of dads that have taken all the wisdom that they can think of and they've put it down into notes. And so they've numbered them and everything. So they've got their own little convening of wisdom. But really, we want to, as a matter of fact, the preacher directly addresses the son in chapter 12, verse 12. But given the debauchery of Solomon's life, we have to think that what we've got here is very much a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. So he doesn't want his child or really anybody to make the same mistakes that he did, because they were hard lessons and they probably left a lot of people scarred. So we can take a step back and also know that the Holy Spirit intended this for everyone. It's not just his son, but for everybody. And so we can also see the intent, like the rest of the New Testament. Craig?
I was just going to say about the wisdom. I mean, it's one thing, you can have all the wisdom in the world, but if you don't apply it to your own life, then it's useless.
Yeah, exactly. It's useless. And we're going to talk about the uselessness and the meaninglessness and the vanity of everything. So, but the point of the rest of the Old Testament was to point to what? It's to point to Christ, right? And so that's still the point here. And there's a lot of good pointing to Christ. That was Jesus' mission here, was really to point to God. So what's our mission? What's that?
Follow God.
To follow God, yeah, to teach God, to point other people to God, right? So let's talk about the book a little bit. So we can't talk about the book without talking about the patterns that are in the book. The patterns, there's a lot of contrast and parallels. There's a lot of repeated phrases, and a lot with the repeated phrases is for emphasis, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But probably the most recognized one is going to be vanity or meaningless, futility, chasing or striving after the wind, breath, vapor. That's used quite a bit here. That concept is used almost 30 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. So just meaning the futility of what our lives are, right? And we'll talk about the perspective with that futility. He mentions toil, and toil is essentially meaningless work. So let's see. Go ahead.
I didn't know you were gonna bring this up, but I believe. What's the word? I didn't know if you were gonna bring this up, but I believe the Hebrew for the word that's used for vanity in English is actually hevel.
Hevel.
Yeah, and it's smoke, and so I didn't know if you were gonna bring it up, but it's kind of, when you think about every time he uses vanity and replace it with smoke, it's like an illusion, like a screen.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. That's a great point. And so, he's talking about chasing after the wind, trying to grasp the wind. And so I don't know about you guys. I've never really tried to grasp the wind. I did have a punishment one time when I was growing up. I came home and my parents weren't very happy with me. So I had to rake leaves against the wind. And so that was, it was very interesting. It didn't work well, but I understand the concept here. And so my piles of leaves weren't good. It would be also interesting to know what my parents were talking about. They were inside the kitchen, and I can imagine that they were looking out the kitchen window at me raking leaves against the wind. So, one other thing I wanted to mention, and Job mentions his friends are miserable comforters, like a mirage of streams of water in the desert. And so, and that's one of the things here is the chasing after the wind is like chasing after a mirage. It's, and we've talked about it's just something that's not easily grasped. So then back to toil, toil being meaningless work. For me, it's distracting work that can get in the way of rewarding work. Often this work, maybe it pays our bills, maybe it's necessary, like housework, it's folding clothes. I worked for a guy one time who would throw away our work, and this guy was, my boss, and so we would come in and he'd have deleted the stuff that we worked on. He would have done it overnight, and so it was very frustrating, but that work was toil. It was meaningless. It became nothing. Solomon frequently also mentions joy in some context or another, like enjoyment or rejoicing. We'll talk a little bit about that. He mentions there are grievous evils, and grievous is derived from the noun of grief, which means sadness. When something is grievous, therefore, it's not just bad, but it's so bad that it causes unusually intense shock or sadness. So this is something that's really kind of painful. Solomon also talks about profit or gain, and that's mentioned 6 times. He talks about people being vexed, just really having a hard time with something, and he mentions that 4 times. And then the last one that's probably the most important to our study is under the sun. And so what does that mean? What's the concept that he's talking about under the sun? So we've got all these vanities, this vapor that's chasing after the wind that's under the sun. What is under the sun? This life. Yeah, it's creation, right? And we know that creation's already been subjected to futility because we've read Romans chapter 8, verses 20 and 21. So we know that creation is going to have its toils, it's going to have its problems. And so when Solomon's talking here, he's not going to speak a whole lot about God. He doesn't refer to Israel. A lot of the Old Testament, that's a lot of what we get. So let's start with chapter 1. Starting with chapter 1, Solomon starts with the futility of man's toils under the sun. Looking at chapter 1, verse 2, he says, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All vanity of vanities, all is vanity." So in the Hebrew, you really can't put much more emphasis on something than to say something is of itself, right? Vanity of vanities. It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate vanity. It's the ultimate vapor. The Holy of Holies. This is the ultimate holy place. Song of Songs. So you get the concept. But basically he's saying that life is meaningless. It's the ultimate vanity. So one of the other ways that the Hebrews would add emphasis would be from repetition. And of course, there's plenty of repetition here. So it's going to be very, very remarkable to our study that we've got to keep this in our mind. Number one is that most of the things he's talking about are under the sun, right? And then the other thing is the perspective that he's talking about everything from. And he'll later disprove it in chapter 12, but the perspective that he's talking about is written from the eyes of a man who thinks God doesn't matter. And let me explain a little bit more about that. So, because when we talk about people who think that God doesn't matter, we probably describe a lot of the people that we rub shoulders with every day. Maybe they live and think the same way. Maybe they're good people, maybe they're bad, maybe they love God, but most people who say they believe in God, but many or most of them live and think like they don't love God, like they don't trust in God, like God doesn't matter. So, it's a difference to say I love somebody and I love these things, but then if you're not going to follow what you're told to do, then that's really not showing your commitment in that love relationship. So you might be able to tell me that, my life has meaning and purpose and my life isn't vanity, and that's wonderful, but you cannot ignore the premise of the preacher, the premise of life under the sun. For some of us, the job of Ecclesiastes will show us our life has no meaning under the sun. And maybe you thought it had meaning, but the things that you invested meaning in your life are things that really don't matter. There's only one thing that gives meaning to life, and it's not just God. It's that we answer to God in eternity. That's what gives meaning to our life. And so if you don't have that, then I would argue, and the author does here as well, that you don't have the meaning that you thought you did. Let's see. So there's a lot to vanity here, and we'll just go through a little bit more. Verses 3 through 7, and I should have brought my reading glasses. I apologize. My eyes are getting old. But in verse 3, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes to the north. Around and around goes the wind. and on the circuits the wind returns. All streams return to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, then there they flow again. So these are the patterns of nature, right? It's the repetition of nature. It's the redundancy of nature. It's the things that just keep on happening. And, when I was reading this, and I was thinking about my wife, Heather. When she was growing up, she grew up kind of near the beach. And so the beach was somewhere that they would go pretty often. Maybe you grew up near the lake. Maybe you grew up near the mountains, whatever. But now she doesn't care to go to the beach that much. So because she's done it all. It's interesting, we've met people from Wyoming, and Heather and I would love to move out to Wyoming. We think of it very beautiful. And but when we've talked to people that were moving here from Wyoming, they're like, yeah, the wind, and there's all these other problems and all that. So, it's a matter of perspective, but still life gets to be redundant and monotonous. It's the same old thing all the time. So I speak, and then I can't catch back up with my notes. But let's see. And then also one other thing that we take for granted here sometimes, just talking to some people that moved out here from California one time, they were talking about how green everything was. I never thought about how green things are. But they're from California. Everything's brown in California, no matter, at least the parts of California I've been to. Continuing on. Verse 8, all things are full of weariness, and man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. So everything's been done. There's nothing new. This kind of comes back to, the attitude that a lot of people have. I've had it, and I would bet everybody's had it. I'm bored, right? I'm bored. There's nothing to do. Just the same old, same old. And even with all the technology, despite all of our work in progress, how quickly we get bored with what we once craved. Did we stand in line for a new iPhone, and then 2 years later we're selling that same iPhone? How are we getting so bored with these things? What are the things that some people do to escape boredom and futility? And maybe they can't collect their thoughts like Solomon did here. Maybe they don't have an authorship or something, but maybe they overindulge. And we'll see where Solomon went through that. Maybe they worship the created rather than the creator. Maybe they go for the distractions like sports, news, politics, television, social media. And those are fine in small quantities, right? But it's easy to overindulge in these things. Drugs and alcohol, gambling. Then there's also other dangerous and self-destructive behaviors where people want to push boundaries, maybe have an affair, maybe do something illegal. Going back to the scriptures here, picking up in verse 10, is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new, it has been already in the ages before us. Verse 11, there is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. So he's saying that there's futility in both directions. There's futility in my future, there's futility in the past. Everything is vanity. So it's also shocking how quick people forget you, whether you've moved on from this life or whatever else. It's shocking, right? And I mean, even if we've spent years together, a lot of times those memories start to fade. Moving on, and then down in verse 14, he says, I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after the wind. So he kind of just bookended everything that he's talked about. He started with talking about everything is vanity, and right here in verse 14, everything is vanity. So it's a repeat. So you guys depressed enough that everything's vanity, everything's just, I mean, it's a hard thing to swallow. But again, if we talk about the perspective here, that this is under the sun, and this is not having that godly perspective of living that life for God and having the eternity that we're going to have to answer. Is there a question?
Yeah. You're talking about vanity being smoke. I had looked at that before. It made me think about vanity being smoke. I where we have been at the house, having, today's day 75 of smoke in our backyard. Well, I've thought about all of the things, like setting up a garden, can't use it. Setting up other things, to have people over, things like that, can't use it. How much time went up in smoke? And it makes you realize, wait a second, is that the focus? And it helps exactly what he's saying. Where are we spending our time? And it hit me right between the eyes for sure.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, anything else? Then moving on to verse 17. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this is but a striving after the wind. And so this wisdom that he sought after is a very earthly wisdom. What is the wisdom under the sun? It's man's wisdom. In verse 18, he also goes on to say that for in as much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So that's what he has to say about the wisdom of man is it's just going to increase your frustrations with life. It's also an irony that this is a wisdom book, and he's talking about wisdom. But again, if we talk about wisdom, he's talking about the wisdom that, now we can go down to a bookstore, we can go to the internet, and we can find a lot of man's earthly wisdom, right? We can see how we can have better finances, we can maybe exercise a little bit better, maybe we can parent a little bit better, whatever. There's all types of self-improvements that are there. There are books about it. And there are things that can really add a lot of value to our life under the sun. But it just helps you live your meaningless life better, right? That's essentially what he's saying here. So he talks a little bit more about wisdom in chapter 2. We'll just kind of skip over that for the moment. And then in chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, we won't read all this, but he's talking about the self-indulgence that he's got, that he's done all these things. He's created all these things. He's created gardens and pools and buildings, and he's had a lot of possessions. In chapter 5, verses 10 and 11, he talks about the love of money and the accumulation. And you just get the whole sense of, I just need more. Under the sun, I just need more. I can't be satisfied with just a little bit. I've got to continue to have more. And at what cost? So we know Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines. He married foreign women. And what was the cost of that? Israel became a divided kingdom because of that. He sinned against God. This is 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 13. So Jeroboam and the other 10 tribes had enough under Solomon, and finally they brought the issues to Solomon's son Rehoboam. So our desires are never satisfied. We always want more if we're thinking under the sun, if we don't have that eternal perspective. Man's never satisfied, even when everything on the outside is good. So what's the difference between a hamster in the cage on the wheel and a man working his life for the things he either cannot obtain or they pass away? Maybe if we had a bigger house in a special neighborhood, a new job, a new truck, maybe we'd be happy. Keep on looking for a change in circumstances. At first you're struggling because you're at home, you're a teenager, and you've got your lack of freedom. And man, if I only had my driver's license, I would be out of here. I'd be having a good time, which is actually a change because that's the way I felt. But I know my kids, I don't know why. I couldn't get rid of them. I couldn't kick them out of the house. It's like, go, please. I don't know. Things have changed for this generation. Anyways, so once I get my license, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be happy. And then you get to college and you think, wow, if I just had the right job, and maybe I make enough money, then things are going to be good. I can move out. I can just have my own life. And then you graduate, you take the job, and you're like, well, if I just start a family, the family's going to be the thing, the family, and I'll be good. And then you get the family, and you're like, well, if I just made a little bit more money for my family, then things would be okay. And so the things that you had prayed for, the things that you had asked for, that you've gotten, you have forgotten them, and you keep on looking for what's the next thing that's going to satisfy me. But what's the cost for us? What are we doing to our families in pursuit of more under the sun? I'm sure you know plenty of families like I do that prioritized work or keeping kids in sports and activities that lost the focus, and they divorced, they broke their families. Maybe we saw them a little bit less at church, and a little bit less. And then one day, they were gone. And because of that staggered leaving, it was hard to even know that they were no longer here. So it's meaningful when we have to give an answer to God in eternity. It matters when every deed of ours is brought into judgment. The devil is happy for you to toil under the sun. Mark chapter 8, verse 36, for what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? And moving back down to Scripture here, chapter 2, verses 18 through 26, we're going to talk a little bit more about toil. And I'm not going to read all this again, but he talks about the man who will come after him. All of the things that you work for, and then somebody's going to come after you and he's going to inherit them. And that's very ironic here because we've got Solomon, and the person who came after him was Rehoboam. And so he said that this person probably won't appreciate what he gets because he hasn't worked for it. Is he a wise or is he a fool? But he will, regardless of if he's wise or a fool, he's still going to inherit what was toiled for and built with wisdom. So Rehoboam, 1 Kings chapter 14, and he's also in 2 Chronicles chapter 11. Out of the 700 wives and 300 concubines, this is his heir to the throne, right? And so we don't know of any others that could have replaced him. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he took the throne. And what we know about Rehoboam when he took the throne, what did he do? Actually, I had to look it up, but I've heard the stories before, forgot. But he rejected the wisdom of the older advisors, Solomon's older advisors, and he went with the advice of his younger friends. And that wisdom was when Jeroboam had come to Rehoboam, he said, hey, Solomon made things really hard on everybody here. And so if you could just make things a little bit easier, that'd be great. We could work together. And so Rehoboam rejected that. And one thing that I read is said that he put curses out. So he split the kingdom. He's at war with Judah. So already, what Solomon had built, all the grandness of what he built, all the beautiful things, is the kingdom is torn apart. Eventually, Egypt invades, and Egypt takes all those treasures and takes them back to Egypt. So he loses the treasures of the kingdom. And there's obviously a lot of other struggles, but it's just interesting that Solomon talks about what's going to happen with the inheritance, and then we know the story now of what did happen. But in the end, death is for all. And that's one of the points that Solomon makes here. Death is going to come to the wise and the foolish in chapter 2, verses 12 through 16. It's going to come to man and beast, chapter 3, verses 16 through 22. Man's going to live a few days, then die, chapter 6, verse 12. And then chapter 3, verses 14 through 15. Notice what lasts forever. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away. So what God has created endures and lasts forever. That's what he perceives. And again, the perspective of the writer here right now, and again, he'll disprove in chapter 12 intentionally, but the perspective here is really just like a lot of our neighbors. The people who think they know God, who say that they believe in God, but they're not going to live their life in a way that would honor God. But we're all going to die, and that's one of the last points that he makes. So, at least in chapter 3. So there's plenty of other things that he mentions that are vanity. We're not going to go into all these. I've got a ton of lists. I'm a list maker, and so we're not going to go into all these. So Groundhog Day, maybe you are familiar with this movie. So 1993, Bill Murray, and the premise is that he's a news reporter. He's gone to cover Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and he gets trapped in this day over and over and over again. And so some people have estimated that he spent about 30 decades, or not 30 years, 3 decades, trapped in the same day over and over and over again, because he did seek after knowledge. He did seek after self-indulgence. He did seek after all these things, really, that Solomon had. But in the end, he realized, I mean, they didn't end with the perspective of God, but that he can't be filled by just all the self-indulgence of life. Yes?
I know you're a movie buff, but I'm a music buff on verses, and it would be a little remiss, I think, from my era anyway, to miss chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, which was a bird song. A time to die. It was Turn, Turn, Turn was the name of the song. Mm-hmm. But it was a great song, and what they did is just lift it right straight out of Ecclesiastes.
And from what I understand, there's only 3 words in that song that aren't from Ecclesiastes. Only 3 words, and then I don't know what they are. Turn, turn, turn. Yeah. And then also the writer of that song supposedly gives a portion of his profits back to Israel somehow. I don't know what foundation he does, but it's very interesting. So, and really the poem that's here in chapter 3, beginning with the first few verses, he starts it off, he bookends things. It's a time to be born and a time to die. And everything else that's going to be in this poem here is going to fit in between those 2 bookends. These are the things, again, it's almost like what we read in chapter 1, all the things in nature. It's all the things really of man here, all the toil of man. Let's see. Okay. So one other thing I want to point out here in chapter 3, verse 11, and this is where he's talking about God. He says, God, He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to end. So God has put eternity into man's heart. Man can't really comprehend eternity from beginning to end. But it's very interesting that he's put this here. And so it's a truth. There's something missing, and some people can put their fingers on it, and it's the eternity. It's the eternal perspective. And this is one thing, the reason why people aren't satisfied with the world, the reason why they're not fulfilled is because eternity is there, and people can't put their finger on it.
It's kind of a weird thing. I just noticed it now. Have you ever seen like the first Hellboy movie that came out like in the early 2000s? There's a line in there about the characters are talking, and the fishman character Abraham talks. It says like man has like a bottomless pit in their heart, and they just want to fill it up, but they can never fill it up. That right there in verse 11, I wouldn't be surprised they took it from there. But if you have eternity in your heart, you can never truly feel it under the sun.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point, right? And so that's something that Solomon was able to, again, he dropped the hint in here, but he's still not ready to conclude until he gets to chapter 12. Let's see. Okay. Other lists that we've got made here, there's joy and contentment versus fulfillment. So in chapter 2, verse 24, and so it's not all despair. He talks about how we can find joy. So chapter 2, verse 24, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from Him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? So again, this is something that it sounds like you could be content with that, but joy is not the same thing as contentment. So you can find some measure of happiness in this. And again, if you're not thinking of anything but under the sun and you don't have that eternal perspective, then this is an easy place to find your joy. But I mean, it's living simply, right? And I mean, it's not a bad thing to find joy in what you eat and drink and enjoy your toil. And also one of the thing was, he says there's nothing better for a person than to do this. In chapter 3, verses 12 and 13, he also says there's nothing better. He says there's nothing better for them to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in his toil. So again, a repeat of the same thing. In chapter 3, verse 22, there's nothing better than a man should rejoice in his work. Chapter 5, verse 18, eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him. Chapter 5, verse 19, everyone to whom God has given wealth, possessions, and the power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. But what's the difference? What's really the difference between joy and contentment? I mean, it sounds like we could be content with this. And also, why did he put these, why did he sprinkle these in here when he's talking about everything is vanity, and then he's talking about joy here? So he's, what's that?
God is mentioned in it. Every verse when he says it has joy or contentment.
Right, yeah, God's mentioned in it. So he's also not saying that you can be filled with it. He's saying that you can find joy with it. And so we know, I go out to eat every now and then, and I find some joy in some of my meals, but I know I'm not, and I get temporarily full, but I don't find fulfillment necessarily. I don't find my purpose in it.
Yeah, but when I think of contentment, I think of I'm okay with where I am. I'm just okay here. But joy says, yeah,
Right.
it's a lot better than just,
Exactly.
contented is just, okay. so I'm
It's
here.
a settling, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm here, whatever, So that's kind of what contentment is.
I think a good way of saying it between joy and contentment is, this was from Twitter I found, but it says, "Dear God, allow me to never be so busy that I can't hear your voice." So contentment is when you can't hear the voice, but joy is when you do hear the voice during your works.
If you would repeat it,
Oh,
so people.
I was just saying the difference between the joy and contentment is, and I found this off Twitter, is, "Dear God, never allow me to be so busy that I can't hear your voice." It kind of goes with what you were saying earlier about people eventually leaving. Like, content is when we're working to the point where we can't hear his voice. But joy is when you're working and you can still hear his voice, where you're not so busy to hear him when.
Right, exactly. And one other thing I'll point out here is, these are simple things, but if we start to accumulate these things for fulfillment, and that's another thing where people get off the rails, is they try to accumulate. So to take satisfaction in the toils, don't live for the toils. One of the mantras that I've tried to work by is I work to live, I don't live to work. So I'm not going to work 24 hours a day. I'm not going to neglect my family. I'm not going to do these things. So work to live, don't live to work. And then one of the other things that you guys have probably heard is nobody's ever been on their deathbed wishing that they had more time to work, but maybe wishing that they had more time to spend with family and friends and do some of the meaningful things of life. So we've got just a little second left, but really, as far as meaning, we talked a little bit about how to find it, that it's God with the eternal purpose. It's answering to God, and that's how we can have meaning. And looking forward to Rodney's lesson. I hope I didn't step too much on your lesson at all, but one other movie that I want to talk about just real quick is Saving Private Ryan, and I don't know if you guys like that one or not, but Saving Private Ryan. And so the premise is, it's a World War II movie. This group of soldiers is sent out to find Private Ryan. His brothers have been killed in action, and so I can't remember his name, but the head of the army has found out that he is the sole surviving brother, and so he has this group of soldiers go out and find him and retrieve him so he doesn't get killed in battle as well. And so the group does question their futility, their sacrifice, and their peril to be sent to save some other soldier. Only one member of the squad survives with Private Ryan. And then right here at the end, there's Captain Miller. Captain Miller's fought with Private Ryan through the end, but he is mortally wounded. And as Private Ryan leans down to him, Captain Miller tells him to earn this, earn it. And that's really the same thing here, is we've got a huge jewel that's been given to us, and we still have to earn it. We still, we can never pay back what's been given for us, but we've got to try to earn it. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you for the feedback, and I hope I didn't squirrel too much, but let's go to God in prayer real quick, and then we'll be dismissed. Holy, merciful Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for the many blessings of it, Father. We thank you for your word, and we thank you for the faithfulness that you have to it, that we know that we can study it and that it's not changing, and that you're truthful, and that we can apply these things to our lives, Father. There is so much wisdom in these books, and these books apply to so much more than just under the sun, Father. And we know that we can work with an eternal purpose and it not be toil. And we know that ultimately, again, our mission is to serve you and to point other people to you. Father, we pray that you would be with this good church and all that it does, and be with everybody as they're on their way home this evening. In Jesus' most holy name, amen.